His head was, never mind.
In the bag. On the Sports Lines is on the air and wake us up. September's about to end. I'm Steve Rabinowitz, and I've set the alarm for about 1 hour and 57 minutes from right now.
And I'm Jay Kaplan. And October is one of the best months on the sports calendar, ever more so because two of my favorite words happen: October baseball.
And I'm Anthony Strait, and I just gotta be honest, after the day, I'm shocked that I have an ulcer at this point, being a Mets fan. Holy crap!
We're glad that we're glad you
What
made
a
it, Anthony.
72 hours.
We're glad you're alive. We have a lot to do. This is the pretty much the end of September edition of On the Sports Lines. And if you thought October was going to be amazing. These last few days in September have given us a ton of stuff. So with the Jets and Giants in full swing, the MLB playoffs officially starting tomorrow, although today felt like playoff games, even though they were just regular season makeup games. It will include both of the locals, by the way, will the playoffs. Has to be an act of God that would take over this show to lead. Oh, I'm sorry, God, a Knicks trade? Okay, never mind. Let's
Wait,
start with the
was
NBA.
that God or Shams you were talking to?
It was God because I still believe that Shams has some work to do before getting over God on my speed dial. On
Gotcha.
Friday night, we got the first ever Shams bomb as the New York Knicks and Minnesota Timberwolves, both who reached unexpected highs in the 2023-24 season, are close to a stunning deal. Not official yet, by the way. The Knicks are close to acquiring Karl-Anthony Towns, the four-time All-Star and two-time All-NBA player, for Julius Randle, three-time All-Star and two-time All-NBA player, and Dante DiVincenzo, who is an NBA champ, by the way, the only one of the bunch, and a man whose contributions in the second half of the Knicks season were immeasurable as he stepped up in scoring and leadership. Also, a first round pick is involved here that the Knicks will send via Detroit, but it's heavily protected. We may not even see it come through for about 5 years unless Detroit makes the playoffs. With all of that said, Anthony, how does this true trade move the needle for you as a Knicks person, supporter, fan?
But how do you like this for Friday night? You take your niece to a hockey game. She watched the favorite team win. She trashes you on the way to the Long Island Railroad because the Mets stink. And then all of a sudden, you get a text from one of your long time friends from college saying the Knicks are traded for Karl-Anthony Towns. And I'm thinking BS. And then my ESPN alert goes off. And then several other alerts go off on my phone. And then by the time I get home, the trade is all but pretty much official. Um, but let's get to the bottom of it though. Bishop Robinson's injury is the reason why this trade is happening because with Bishop Robinson gone pretty much until possibly January, the Knicks are extraordinarily thin at center. And look at their roster; they don't have a 7-footer on that roster right now. Before this trade, Precious Achua is 6'9", a decent rebounder, gives you some defense minutes off the bench, but how much can you really rely on him as a backup or as a center for that matter? And then there's Jogo Sims, who was very athletic, but still very much needs some seasoning. And then there's Julius Randle before the trade, who offensively would give the Knicks something, but defensively, especially on the glass, is where the Knicks may have his issues. But Karl-Anthony Towns with this trade, it pretty much clears up all of those things. Karl-Anthony Towns obviously is a multiple time All Star, um, a easy 2010 guy, and a guy who shoots close to 40% for his career behind the 3 point arc. Floor spacing with this lineup is going to be very, very crucial when you think about Bridges and Jalen Brunson, main attackers getting to the basket. And also, Clark Towns is a great facilitator out on the post. It's something that the Knicks wouldn't have with Mitchell Robinson because of as good as he is defensively. He's very much offensively limited. And this is also a trade that the Knicks, and a show that the Knicks aren't confident that Mitchell Robinson can stay on the court. He's missed 120 games the last 4 seasons, including only playing 35 games last year, and and getting injured again in the playoffs. So Mitchell Robinson was, I mean, he started out last season, looked like he was going to have his best year, especially on the defensive end, but availability has been an issue with him. And with Karl-Anthony Towns, that definitely gives the Knicks a floor space at the 5. Karl-Anthony Towns go back to his original center position. Obviously, he played power forward the last couple of years with Rudy Gobert at the center in Minnesota. He reunites with Tom Thibodeau, who coached him for 2.5 seasons. And also, he may have a chip on his shoulder. I mean, we know about the reputation of Karl-Anthony Towns being on and off, particularly in the playoffs. He'll have a good game and follow up by a pretty bad game. And unfortunately, that's been his reputation. And players hate to be called this, but he's been called soft among his critics. So maybe so you will hope, and also he's a local native. He's from Jersey. So you will hope that Karl-Anthony Towns will have motivation and really be able to upgrade, to definitely put the Knicks at the point where they definitely can't compete with a Boston Celtics team that has their own stretch five and Kristaps Porzingis, who is going to miss some time to start the season. And also keep this in mind, with the Knicks, losing Dante DiVincenzo sucks, okay? He was a fan favorite. He had one of the biggest three-pointers in franchise history, and that miraculous comeback against the 76ers in the first round was big in the second half of the season with all the injuries, averaged close to 18 a game. Knicks all-time single-season three-point shooter. But when you look at the Knicks' depth in the backcourt, they have a lot of depth at the guard position. When you think about Deuce McBride maybe having more of an expanded role and being at that two-guard position, you have Cameron Payne that they signed in the offseason, and also Tyler Collick, a guy that they drafted, who also is a ball handler and provides three-point shooting. And you look at the Knicks roster, they still have the depth in the backcourt. But Karl-Anthony Towns not only gives them a bona fide second scorer behind Jalen Brunson and a guy who can also play pick and roll. When you think about opposing center having to guard Cat at the outside the perimeter, but also he gives them a rim protector. That's something that they was not going to have with Julius Randle playing sparingly minutes at the 5. So I think this is a trade that, when the emotion of the shock of the trade wears off, I told you about this on Saturday. I had a rational thinking finally kick in because I love Dante DiVincenzo. I think he's a great player. But at the end of the day, this is a trade that the Knicks out of necessity had to make. But I think it makes them a more well-rounded team. And the fact that now they have an offensive threat at the center position that they didn't have prior to this trade.
Yeah, well, one thing though that is going to be interesting, and I don't know, we've seen a lot of Karl-Anthony Towns probably in this area kind of as more of an observer than someone who's lived in the area in Minnesota where he's played all his career. The question I have remaining, and we'll get into more about this, I think, as it goes along, is can Karl-Anthony Towns accept being kind of the second person on this, the second scorer on this team, or the second banana on this team? Because he did that in Minnesota when Anthony Edwards really made his leap over these last 2 years, but is the only player on this team who has a supermax contract, and that's going to be interesting going down the line to see what Karl-Anthony Towns' dynamic is going to be with the rest of the team. Although it would have been the same way with Julius Randle, honestly, because he didn't really get a lot of time with that team in the second half of the year when this team really showed what identity it had. And there's always been issues of it dating back to the last postseason run. Jay, what are your thoughts on this trade?
Well, Rabbi, you kind of said it best in our group text. And, for a lot of reasons, this trade is, to use Mr. Spock's favorite word, fascinating. On its surface, I can see how it might piss off the WFA and rage caller segment of the Knicks fan base. My initial reaction before finding out that Knicks president Leon Rose has been wanting Cat for years was that this trade was born out of head coach Tom Thibodeau's intractable reluctance to run any kind of a five-man unit that involved Julius Randle playing any significant minutes at center due to yet another extended injury absence by Mitchell Robinson. Now, obviously, there's more to it than that. Though Cat does give Tibbs a legit five-man, and while the fan in me is saddened by the fact that the Nova Knicks unit of Jalen Brunson, Dante DiVincenzo, Josh Hart, and Mikal Bridges will never play together, I do think the Knicks got the better end of this trade in terms of what is now likely to be their primary five-man unit, even if also as of now their overall roster depth may have taken a step back. The rebounding and block stats, basic along with per 36 and per 100 possessions, would seem to paint a decent picture of how Cat is an upgrade over Randall, especially in terms of what Tibbs is looking for in a center, which is rebounding, an area he wants to own maybe more than any coach in the association, and the rim protection that Anthony mentioned. Now, based on just those two areas, you can see why Tibbs was concerned with any scenario where Randall would have to play extended minutes at the five. Robinson, for his career, averages 7.9 boards and 1.9 blocks. But if you use his per 36 and per 100 possessions career numbers, the comparisons with Randall and Cap, who've been big minute starters for most of their careers, as compared to Robinson, who's never really averaged close to 30 minutes per game in any season, paint more of a picture of what Tibbs is looking for. Robinson's career regular season per 36 rebounds per game and blocks per game numbers are 11.7 and 2.8 respectively. His career per 100 possession rebounds per game and blocks per game numbers are 16 flat and 3.8. In the playoffs, those numbers are 12.5 and 2 per 36 and 18.1 and 2.9 per 100. Randall, for his 10-year career, averages 9.4 rebounds per game, has only been above 10 rebounds per game 3 times, never more than 10.2 per game. He's also never averaged close to 1 block per game in any season, and is 0.4 blocks per game for his career. Even his career per 36 rebounding and block numbers are just 10.5 and 0.5. His career per 100 possessions, rebound and blocks are 14.4 boards, 0.6 blocks. And in the playoffs, those numbers are lower. His career per 36 rebounding and block numbers are 10 flat and 0.2. His career per 100 possession rebound and block numbers in the playoffs, 14.3, 0.3. So his rebounding is somewhat similar to regular season versus playoffs, but his blocks are so much worse. Towns, for his 9-year career, averages 10.8 boards and 1.3 blocks. But if you focus just on the 7 seasons prior to 2022-23 when the T-Wolves added Rudy Gobert, forcing Cat to move from the 5 to the 4 and play more on the perimeter, you get a better sense of him as a center, as that was his primary position. For those 7 seasons, he averaged 11.3 rebounds and 1.4 blocks. 3 straight seasons where he averaged better than 12 rebounds per game, and 3 seasons where he averaged 1.4 blocks per game or better. 2 seasons where he was the 5 in Minnesota that made the playoffs. He averaged 12 rebounds and 1.5 blocks per game in the postseason. His per 36 numbers are practically identical in both the regular season and postseason, as he averaged almost 36 minutes per game. But his per 100 possession numbers give a better indication of his effectiveness. He averaged 16.2 boards and 2 flat blocks in the regular season, 16.3, 2.1 blocks in the playoffs. If he can improve his help positioning and rotation when he's the primary defensive big man, another key things Tibbs is looking for, and I'm thinking he's trending in the right direction considering the job he did on Nikola Jokic in the Western Conference playoffs, then the Knicks won't be at as much of a disadvantage when opponents run pick and rolls at him and Brunson. Having Bridges and Anunoby as perimeter stoppers should also help with that. That alone, to me, makes Cat an upgrade over Randall and allows him to return to the center position, which is his best position, but with all the improved perimeter offensive skills to go with the low post skills he came into the NBA with. He allows the Knicks to run the offense through him on the low block. He can run pick and rolls with Brunson, and Bridges and OG be ready to knock down those corner threes. And now that he's become a legit 40% point shooter on decent volume, he's averaged 5.5 3-point attempts per game over the last 6 years, and he's knocked down those attempts at 40.1%. The Knicks can even play 5 out with him on the floor. He's as much a legit 20-plus point per game scorer as Randall is. He's averaged at least 20.8 per game in every season since his rookie year. And while he may not be the passer that Randall is, he's also not the ball stopper that Randall can be at times, which should make the spacing better on offense, as will his ability to score at all 3 levels. And if Towns and Tibbs have truly reached a good place in their relationship, which was rocky as hell when both were in Minnesota, to say the least, though Jimmy Butler probably made it worse. And if Towns is all in with buying into the culture that Brunson and Tibbs have built, then this trade should make the Knicks a lot better.
See, here's the thing. There's so much iffy stuff on Karl-Anthony Towns. Will he have a chip on his shoulder because Minnesota traded him, which reportedly he was floored by? We all were.
Oh yeah,
And will this team, will he just get into that offense? The spacing should be a lot better. I think there was a lot of thinking that Julius Randle was not going to be on this team next year, even though he was very much excited to be on this team this year, finally at full strength. But what Minnesota gets in this deal, and it's kind of funny, the initial reaction was both sides kind of lost on this. There seems to be a little more going towards the Knicks getting the better end of the deal. But it seems to me at a point there is some lose-lose in this. But on Minnesota's side, I didn't realize how big the loss was until I looked more deeper into it. Just because of the fact that Karl-Anthony Towns did some brilliant work last year in both in the Western Conference first round and the Western Conference semifinals on defense, again, specifically matchup-wise, Karl-Anthony Towns is a huge advantage over Julius Randle, although I don't want to really compare this as a one-to-one situation. But he will be able to guard Jason Tatum a little bit better. He will be able to guard a much smaller team like Indiana a little bit better. He will be able to do some work possibly against Joel Embiid in a 7-game series if he stays healthy. The entire 7-game series, that's always a big if. But one thing I will...
healthy.
Yes, I know. Everybody has to stay healthy. That's another thing that has to be mentioned. Karl-Anthony Towns had a pretty good year last year playing 62 games, but there's been years, 35 in 2020, in 2020, 2020 to 2021, 50 games, and then in 22-23, only 29. So those numbers are going to be key. You can't always predict them, even though people try, but you can't always predict those numbers, although the trend seems to be going a little bit less. The Dante DiVincenzo piece is very interesting. We don't know if he was going to be happy with a reduced role this year. One report said over the weekend that he wasn't going to be. Another report disputed the other report, so we can only go in terms of a he said type situation, which is perfectly fine. I think, though, in the honest to God mode, by the way, DiVincenzo last year, more three-pointers in a season than any Timberwolf has ever had in a season altogether. So that's something to know. That was a mid-range team last year when it came to three-pointers. I think DiVincenzo will help a lot, but the biggest questions are going to be this. Number one, the spacing becomes worse with Randle basically taking over Towns' position at the 4, especially because of the fact that it's going to put more pressure defensively on Rudy Gobert. And as we've seen in playoffs past, although it wasn't really on display last playoffs, sometimes it can be a liability to play in a game late, especially on offense. Number two, it's really what is going to be the role that they'll use for Randle in the end, and how much will they use DiVincenzo? There's already a sixth-man person on this team in Naz Reid, so DiVincenzo may only get 15 to 20 or 20 to 25 minutes a game. Remember, though, he is still in charge for 3 years, $31.9 million. So he is very cheap and is a big piece that the Timberwolves can have to improve the depth of a team that was still pretty deep to begin with. I think Minnesota got a little worse in this trade in terms of matchup, but overall, if Julius Randle can be the same player he was in his 2 All-NBA seasons, especially 2 years ago when him and Brunson kind of clicked a little bit more, I think this trade's going to be a win-win possibly for both teams. Not the loss that I thought before. All right, let us move on to baseball. And guys, it's fall. And you know what they say, gents. There's only one October. I would almost say it's only one Rocktober, but that was a whole long time ago. After a year hiatus, welcome back to the playoffs, New York Yankees. Woo! The journey to Title 28 will start this Saturday. Despite losing 4 of their last 6 at home, the Bronx Bombers managed to snag the number 1 seed in the AL. The first time they've done that in 13 years. But boy, are there concerns, especially in the entire American League. But for this, we'll focus on the Yankees in particular. Jay, on the hitting front, what is your main concern?
Aaron Judge. And I can hear the viewers now How can Jay be calling the captain who had a 322, 458, 701 slash line, a 1.159 OPS, 223 OPS plus, 218 weighted runs created plus with 58 homers, 144 RBI, 122 runs scored, 95 extra base hits, and
Did they
309.
really think all of these numbers, by the way, in
Yes,
their
they
head?
did.
Every
Yes, they
single
did.
one of them? That's a lot.
Is the presumptive AL MVP and led all of baseball in homers, RBIs, walks, on base slugging, OPS, OPS plus, weighted runs created plus, and the AL and extra base hits and TB. He's the biggest concern in the lineup for the Yankees in the ALDS. I get it. Seems completely out of left field, which is an entirely different story. To say that about a guy who has so dominated the junior circuit this season, in many ways more so than he did in his insane 2022 MVP season. The numbers are epic. He's far and away tops in all of these AL offensive categories. Home runs by 14 over Baltimore's Anthony Santander. RBI by 26 over Cleveland's Jose Ramirez. On base by 39 points over teammate Juan Soto. Slugging by 113 points over KC's Bobby Witt Jr. OPS by 170 points over teammate Juan Soto. Weighted runs created plus by 38 points over Soto. But here's why I'm concerned. Aaron Judge and the ALDS have not been a pairing favored by the baseball gods. In fact, you could go so far as to say that the ghost of George Herman Ruth haunts the Yankee center fielder unmercifully when October baseball gets to that round. For his career, in 22 ALDS games across 101 plate appearances and 86 at-bats, Judge has a 198, 300, 419 slash line. That's a 719 OPS. 6 homers, 10 RBI, and 36 strikeouts in those 101 plate appearances, which is a 35.6% strikeout rate. Judge hasn't had a strikeout rate above 30% in the regular season since 2019. It was a career low 24.3 this season, and he's at 28 for his career. This season, Juan Soto aside, no Yankee regular has a batting average over 275, an on-base percentage over 325, a slugging percentage over 500, and an OPS over 825 or an OPS plus above 130. Jazz Chisholm's numbers just as a Yankee are the only ones close to those numbers, as he put up a 273, 325, 500 slash line with an 825 OPS and a 130 OPS plus since changing his zip code to the house that Jeter built. So the AL East champs cannot afford another underwhelming ALDS performance from their captain, especially since other than the 2019 World Series, where he put up a 333, 438, 741 slash line with a 1.178 OPS, 3 homers and 7 RBI, Soto hasn't lit the postseason on fire either, struggling in both the AL and both the League Division Series and League Championship rounds. Judge comes into the postseason after a September where he posted his worst numbers since April. To be fair, and I'm prefacing it with this, every other hitter would love to have a September like this. 277, 429, 590 slash line, 1.019 OPS, 7 homers, 21 RBI, 17 runs scored in 24 games, over 105 plate appearances and 83 at-bats. But again, with a Yankee lineup, which granted is much deeper and demonstrably better than last season, thanks to Chisholm, Giancarlo Stanton, Austin Wells in the middle, and Gleyber Torres at the top. He's done well since hitting in the leadoff spot. This is still a very Judge and Soto driven lineup. And I'd much prefer to see the captain ending the season on a heater similar to the one he had in June, where he had a 409, 514, 864 slash line with a 1.378 OPS, 11 homers, 37 RBI, 25 runs scored in 25 games, over 107 plate appearances and 88 at-bats. That all being said, and looking at it purely through a number-specific 3-foot window, Judge should hope the Yankees face the Orioles in the next round. In 12 regular season games against the denizens of Camden Yards, Judge had a 333, 542, 909 slash line with a 1.451 OPS, 6 homers, 11 RBI, and 9 runs scored while striking out only 9 times across 49 plate appearances and 33 at-bats. That's the kind of numbers they need from Aaron Judge in October if they're going to finally end the chase for 28.
Yeah, and the one thing that's kind of interesting, and I kind of learned this from 2002, Ironically enough, is one hitter does not win you a World Series, but one hitter being in such a slump does not even come close to winning you a World Series. And
And it
unfortunately,
can
the
lose you
Yankees,
one.
yeah, it could easily lose you one, but you just need someone to pick up the slack. But as we've seen all too many times, and I know Anthony's going to hate us for opining over the years, but a lot of Yankees big bats have had struggles in postseason series and have led to some underwhelming playoff appearances. So we'll see what happens. Anthony,
Ironically, the one player in the Yankee batting order who seems to enjoy the postseason is
Stanton.
Stanton. So,
Yes, I'm very excited to see what he does in his first, I think, legit postseason since 2020, when he
especially
was
since he's
really
healthy
covering.
and hitting like it.
Knock on wood. All right, Anthony. Pitching, definitely a lot of concerns, especially after this last week. What are you looking at?
I'm looking at who's going to start game 3 because when you look at the division series, regardless of who they play, Garrett Cole is the ace. I mean, he may have been coming off an injury. He may not look like the Garrett Cole of last year when he was lights out in the Cy Young Award with him, but he's still your guy. He's the trend center in this Yankee rotation. You got to figure Carlos Rodon is going to be the number 2 guy, but after that, it's a toss up. And that's the Cortez injury. The flexor injury to his elbow, which is it has him on the 15-day IL. The timing couldn't have been any worse because he's had a dominant month of September. And was pretty much pitching like the Nestor Cortez we saw in 2022 when he was an All-Star. 2.79 ERA over 19 and third innings. And since August 1st, it seems like literally the last show I talked about Nestor Cortez being a rotation option for Aaron Boone going into the postseason. Since August 1st, 2.62 ERA across 44 and two-thirds innings, striking out 40 batters. And even this short stint in the bullpen, obviously he had the bullpen appearance in Chicago where he pitched very well. He looked like he had set himself up to be the obvious number 3 guy in a 3-man rotation going into the division series. But with his injury, now that kind of throws things up in the air. And you look at Luis Gil and Clark Schmidt has been other options. Both pitched this weekend and both did not look all that great. Clark Schmidt, 4 runs in 4 innings. And Luis Gil just got knocked around on Saturday by the same Pirates team. Has the Yankees
Couldn't keep the ball in the yard.
Yeah, and that's the thing too because you wanted to go with Nestor Cortez because not just the fact that he's finally really coming into the Cortez of old, but his experience as well. He's pitched in 3 playoff games for the Yankees in that 2022 postseason, including a deciding Game 5 in the division series against Cleveland, where he pitched very well in that outing. So now with Gil and Clark Schmidt, you're going with 2 guys who are clearly young and inexperienced in a big spot. And it puts some pressure on the Yankees to have to protect home field advantage. You definitely don't want to be in a situation where you're down 0-2 or the series is tied 1-1 and have to rely on a young, unproven, tested pitcher on the road, whether it be in Baltimore or even in Kansas City. But also, we look at Marcus Stroman being a possible option as well. That might be a guy you want to bring out in long relief as a backup in case you do start one of these guys and things hit the skins very quickly. And I'll ask you guys to step into the shoes of Aaron Boone. If you had this situation, what would be your idea of trying to get around to it? Because I know you certainly do not want to throw away a playoff game on what we call a bullpen game.
No, there's no reason for them to do so, by the way.
And they're not going to. Look, they're not going to put Heel in the bullpen because he's not in that mindset, and it's going to be a problem for him to try and adjust on the fly in the playoffs. Having Clark Schmidt, who has bullpen experience, gives Boone the option of if he elects to start Heel and Heel does not have it, there will be a quick hook and Clark Schmidt will kind of come in to backfill those innings, much the way Cortez backfilled Schmidt in his first start back. So that's an option. I don't see Stroman making the postseason roster because his pitching toolkit does not fit what the Yankees need. Mark Leiter has not been the guy I expected him to be since he's come over from Chicago. But when he's on, he can get hitters out via swing and miss, which is not something Stroman can do. The Yankees can only afford to have one guy in that bullpen who pitches to soft contact, and that's Clay Holmes. They can't afford to have two because neither one of those guys, Stroman or Holmes, is going to get used in high leverage situations based on the fact that they pitch to soft contact, and it's gotten both of them in trouble this year. So, and I agree with you. Cole is 1, Rodon is 2. I see Heel being 3. The issue for all three of those guys is at various points during the year they have struggled keeping the ball in the yard, and that's not something you want to. That's a red flag for me against a team like the Orioles if they're the ones who advance, who are quite capable. Have several guys quite capable of hitting the ball out of the yard.
Yeah, but they're all kind of. Go ahead.
I was actually going to set you up, Rabbi, because got the next angle on this one. There's a opponent plays into this. You got Kansas City and Baltimore waiting in the wings in the division series, and you kept an eye on both teams.
I have over here. First of all, I do think Stroman will make that postseason roster only because you need one long guy in that. Yeah, but you need 4 starters, and if Cortez isn't coming back, you need a 4th guy to be there. So I think you're going to see Stroman, even though he has struggled through the year, and then we'll see what happens if Cortez comes back. Both teams have actually struggled a little bit down the stretch. Yankees, by the way, both teams this year, Yankees are 5-2 against the Royals. Did play them in 3-game series in June and September. They've won. They've actually hit Kansas City pitching pretty hard in the first and second half of the season. I think they have 3 games where they've actually scored 10+ runs. The Royals had 2 7-game losing streaks, by the way, in their last 5 weeks, 11-14 in September. Only reason that they're really in this position is the Tigers actually lost 2 games at the end of the season against the White Sox, who knew that was even possible. Well, the champagne celebration went a little too long.
Yankees did, so you know.
The champagne celebration went a little too long. Let's just say that. But the Royals do have a lot of good pitchers. We'll see Seth Lugo pitching game number 2 of this series, but and then you'll have I cannot get his name. Cole Regan's pitching game 1 of this of any possible series. He'll pitch game 1 tomorrow, and you'll probably see again Lugo in game 2. So if the trend follows, they're going to probably be pitchers in this starting lineup in that series. Yankees have done very well over the years against AL Central teams in the playoffs, and I think the Royals do fit a mold of a team that is young, and a team that might be a little more free swinging, and again, a team that's had some offensive problems over the last few months. So that's what you get with the Royals. I'm not discounting them, but I think they'd rather be the opponent that you want to see. Orioles were 8-5 against the Yankees this year, won 2 out of 3 this week, although, again, that last game was huge for momentum. Cole pitched great, and the team kind of just dominated, and they beat up on Corbin Burns in that last game. You'll probably see him twice in this series if that's the way they go. They've only won 1 out of the 4 series that they played against the Orioles this year, but also the Orioles have kind of struggled. They were a little disjointed towards this. I know that this is the first time in since 96, 97 that they've had multiple years that they made the playoffs back to back. But from July 19th to September 22nd, the Orioles were 28-32, 239 batting average. They were 253 in the first half. And they've had so many issues with their catching. We'll talk about Gunnar Henderson in a moment, but Adley Rutschman hit 201 basically for a 2-month period. The Orioles, and again, they had a little issue just finding a closer. They finally came across Anthony Dominguez as their closer, but their big name in the offseason, they got Craig Kimbrell, the DFA. He's not going to be in this series. So overall, both teams present highs and lows. I think they're probably the two best options that the Yankees could have gotten at this stage. Yankees will be seemingly ready for both of them. They've had good moments against the Orioles in the postseason. They've had no real moments against the Royals in the postseason, but
Not
both
since
of
the
those,
70s, not since the 80s anyway.
yep.
70s
So
and 80s.
it's going to be very interesting to see what happens. Again, you can't predict the ways, and it always seems like the teams that end up having good runs in October are the ones that suck all the way into October. So let's see what happens because baseball.
Yeah, makes no sense.
Never, ever does. All right. The New York Mets will be making their 11th postseason appearance in their franchise history. Thought it would be. That is it. And they did it in the most insane way possible in game one of the doubleheader against the Braves today. It was an 8-7 game that featured lead changes at the top of the eighth, going from 3-0 down to 6-3 up. Bottom of the eighth, going from 6-3 down to 7-6 up. Edwin Diaz, remember to cover your plate next time when you have a chance. And then near the top of the ninth, going from 7-6 down to 8-7 up, thanks to a Francisco Lindor home run. Yes, you can officially now use Linsanity. Jeremy Lin, give it back. After a game for the ages, the Mets will go back to Milwaukee. It's the team that they started the season against and essentially ended their season against, if it weren't for today. Brewers took 5 out of 6 in the season series, including 2 out of 3 this weekend in 3 games that were all technically meaning nothing for the home team. We all should celebrate, but Mets fans worry for the next moment, and since they're playing at 5:30 p.m. tomorrow, let's start worrying. Jay, lineup concern for the Mets.
Francisco Lindor, it's a question of how much will the state of his back impact his play. When he went on the 10-day injured list with that back injury, Met fans, including our own Anthony Strait, not to mention the rest of my siblings, held their collective breath, almost certain their season was closer to going fishing than going to the playoffs. But if what Lindor has done since coming back, especially in game one of today's doubleheader, going 2 for 5, 2 runs scored, 3 RBI, and that 9th inning 2-run homer to give the Mets back the lead for good after the Braves scored 4 in the bottom of the 8th. If that's any indication, then the Mets may have some October life, largely due to their superstar shortstop. Lindor was heating up at the right time, and when the Mets needed it most, right before the back injury hit, with a September slash line of 296, 367, 568, 936 OPS, 3 homers, 7 RBI, 10 runs scored over the first 12 games of the month. The Mets went 9-3 in those 12. Yes, the Mets went 6-2 in the 8 games he missed, but he was missed. He had a decent but not great September 3-game series against Milwaukee, who the Mets, as Rabbi said, they will face tomorrow in the NL Wildcard Series. He went 4 for 12 with a homer, 2 RBI, 2 steals, 2 runs scored, as the Mets took 2 out of 3. Now, he was the DH in the middle game, which was the first time he played a game this season where he was not in the field at shortstop. And he went 0 for 4 with 2 strikeouts. Now, it may be completely anecdotal and utterly coincidental, but some guys aren't as fully engaged when they're used to playing in the field every day and then they get a DH day. It'll be interesting to see if the Mets use him at DH in any game of the Wild Card Series in order to not tax his back, especially since Tuesday's game 1 will be his 5th game in 5 days since coming off the injured list. And if the series goes the distance, it'll be 7 in 7 days without a break, which the Mets and Lindor would have had in full today if they had taken care of business over the weekend or sooner. Now, Lindor freely admitted during the media session in between games of today's doubleheader that his back was still bothering him, and that's not something to take lightly despite today's heroics, though the win made it easy for manager Carlos Mendoza to sit Lindor for the 2nd game of the doubleheader. Now, Lindor's last trip to the wild card round didn't go so well, as the Mets were swept in 2022 by the Padres, and he wasn't anywhere close to an MVP caliber player with a slash line of 200, 333, 500 with an OPS of 833. His only RBI was a solo home run. The Mets will need a better performance from him, or else their October stay will be as short as it was 2 years ago. something more along the lines of his 2016 postseason in Cleveland, where he led the team all the way to Game 7 of the World Series against the Cubs, posting a 310, 355, 466 slash line, and 820 OPS. 2 homers, 6 RBI, 5 runs scored over those 15 games is what's going to be needed. As Brendan Nimmo said after the Mets won the first game of the doubleheader and punched their October baseball ticket, quote, Francisco, his story keeps getting better and better. It's unbelievable to watch him. He is such a bad man. To come up in that situation and do what he did, it takes a special person, and I'm glad he's on my team, end quote. Now, look, Lindor won't win NL MVP because Ohtani, but without the season he did put up, 273, 344, 500 slash line, 844 OPS, 141 OPS, weighted runs created plus 137, with 33 homers, 91 RBI, 107 runs scored, and 29 steals, leading all National League shortstops in homers, runs scored, and slugging, and finished second in RBI, OBP, OPS, and weighted runs created plus. There's no way in hell the Mets are even headed to Milwaukee. Lindor's back will likely not be 100% until the season finally ends, but I think he'll happily endure the discomfort as long as it means the Mets get to keep playing.
You ever hear that saying, I'll only sleep when I'm dead? That just seems to always be the postseason tradition, especially for two teams like the Mets and the Braves.
What's the old saying, Rabbi, everybody's banged up this time of year?
Everybody's fatigued, everybody's banged up, although it seemed like today Lindor was feeling a little less pain. He said he always was going to feel the pain, but stayed in the dugout pretty much almost all of the game and didn't get too much treatment during the game, which he would in times past. But let's see what happens. Also, the fact that he probably will play DH because hasn't played back-to-back games in the field since he came back. So we'll see what happens. Anthony, a bit tired bullpen, by the way, but any questions for the pitching staff going into this playoffs? What do you have?
Yeah. Well, 2 days. Number one, Tyler McGill deserves a bit of applause for at least keeping the Mets in the game. Before that
actually very good outing outside of the fact that he kind of let the long ball go a little bit.
Yeah, well, that was also there with Tyler McGill. It's like when he's on, he's really good, but he has that one bad inning where things go awry. He's been susceptible to the long ball. But also Jordan Shesky eating up innings that the Mets desperately need in that second game. But the miraculousness of everything, the Mets get to pitch their starters on regular rest going into this series. They didn't have to do Severino for game 2 because they were able to come back and win that wacky first game. So he's clearly going to start number 1. And then after that, the Mets have not 1, not 2, but 3 lefties pretty much in the rotation. And most of the season, Milwaukee has struggled against left-handed hitting and left-handed pitching when you think about Shamania, Katana, and David Peterson in succession, except this past weekend. Obviously, Shamania got knocked around in the very first inning, giving up a grand slam to Rhys Hoskins, and that pretty much killed the Mets Friday night before they even had a chance to mount up any kind of rally from that point on. And then Saturday, Katana pitched well for the first 4 innings, and then ran into a bases loaded jam when he gives up a 2-run single, and the Mets offense was MIA. David Peterson felt a lot better. Of course, the Milwaukee Brewers was pretty much resting everybody at that point, and he pitched very well into a 5-0 shutout. The Mets bullpen, however, you can forget that. Everything is no way is going to be available for the start of this series after pitching 23 innings Sunday afternoon, which is yesterday, and pitching 40 today, including that 8th inning with a Braves score of 4 to take the lead.
Career high, by the way, in pitches today in a outing with this 40.
Yeah, 66 total pitches in 2 days. So you just got if the game is close and the Mets need the close game 1 out. Everything is certainly not available, and they look at a situation where they may have to use them 2 more times in the next 3 days. So that's one thing. But then you also look at a bullpen that had to get innings out of Ottavino, that had to get innings out of Madden in the first game. This is a bullpen that is absolutely gassed right now, and I'm with Ayla. I am on the defense about how Major League Baseball handled this whole doubleheader situation where you realize that the wild card round had a built-in day off that the Steelers could have been pushed back a day, at least allow for travel time and not have two incredibly exhausted teams having to travel cross country for their respective wild card series. But with the Mets, hey, look, the Mets they'll take the opportunity to go into a situation where they have a tired bullpen, but now it's going to put a lot of pressure on the starters, particularly Severino, to give them at least 5 or 6 strong innings in the first game. And considering that the second that the Mets are going into get into Milwaukee sometime tonight, that first pitch is what? It's a
The 5:30
5:30
Eastern game
5:30
tomorrow.
Eastern game. So obviously Central Standard Time, that's a 4:30 start time. So the Mets are really behind the eight ball as far as the pitching staff as a whole, particularly the bullpen. But if you're the Mets right now, you're not complaining. You're living to fight another day. You're getting on a charter flight back to Milwaukee, Wisconsin, for the best of three.
One thing that's actually very interesting is the fact that, yes, the bullpen is tired, but they didn't use a lot of people today. Diaz was the biggest one, using him for the 40 pitches. And for some reason, I don't know how he got all that energy in the ninth inning. I don't know if it was just a backbreaker of Lindor, but he was throwing much better pitches. I don't see him effectively pitching tomorrow, but I would never be surprised just because you don't know how these 3-game series are going to be. But the only ones they really used is Razabon and Diaz. So you're gonna have a healthy Ryan Stanek, you're gonna have a healthy Uto, you're gonna have you're gonna have options at least for tomorrow. But I think it would behoove the Mets for Severino to go 6 to 7
they need
innings.
Severino to give them a quality start tomorrow.
Even if they don't win, you want to make sure you do not get you really use only 2 to 3 pitchers tomorrow. The Brewers are the opponent, and remember they've lost 9 out of 10 games in the NLDS or the wild card round. They got swept last year, remember, at home by Arizona, so it's not the worst matchup I think for them to do to get into this. So only half of his players on this roster are on this team. Were from 2023, made it over to 20. From the finale, the roster from 2024. Only 13 teams from the 2023 wild card roster are on this team this year. This team has had so much turmoil. I mean, obviously, losing Craig Counsell to the Cubs is never the biggest thing, is never the greatest thing. They lost Christian Yelich to injury pretty much right out of the gate. Brandon Woodruff went on to the IL. And, they just have a lot of good talent, learned from the David Stearns way when he was president, and look at what they have. The 2 things that are going to be the biggest issues in terms of it. The number one, and it's been very well documented, base stealing. The Mets did not throw out the Brewers at all this year on the bases. They stole 6 bases in the Friday game this week. They are one of the best base running team, one of the best stealing teams in baseball. They have the second most stolen bases in franchise history this year with 217. Bryce Terang had 50 steals this year. The only 2 people who had more are names that are very uncommon, like De La Cruz and Ohtani. So, and you had you had Jackson Chourio and Willie Adames, who were the first pair of teammates ever to go into the 2020 club. So, if the Mets get on base, luckily you have probably one of the best pickoff pitcher of the rotation in Severino, but you're going to need to have to keep them exactly where they are. So, once the Brewers get hit, that's going to be the big thing. The other thing is the bullpen. The starting rotation is still pretty good with Freddie Peralta leading the way. He'll start game 1. But the bullpen has been lights out this year. Devin Williams has a 1.25 ERA, 0.969 whip. He'll be the closer. Trevor McGill is going to be the setup man. A very formidable rotation. If you get to the seventh inning, we've seen the Mets press against a lot of teams. That could be the problem. The Mets are going to need to hit early and hit often, and that's the only way I see them getting past the Brewers in this series, guys. All right, let's move on to the rest of the wild card matchups. This is the wild card segment. The new wild card format is in year 3 of its existence. 3-game series, higher seed hosts. 2 out of 3 gets to your division series destination. Let's go. We talked about the Baltimore. I'm going to start off. We're going to highlight a player from each team to watch. I, again, had talked about the Baltimore Orioles and Kansas City Royals. They'll match up in one of the wildcard matchups. 3 years ago, the Orioles were a 110-loss team. A year ago, the Royals were a 105-loss team. Now they meet in the DS. White Sox, you may have a legitimate chance. I'm just kidding. You're going to suck for a long time. Okay, let's talk about Gunnar Henderson for the Orioles. He was last year's Rookie of the Year. He saw his average slip down, as I mentioned before, like the whole entire team did in the second half. He only had 2 home runs the last few weeks of the season. Still, he is a 281, 37 home run, 92 runs batted in, 893 OPS. And last year, he was really one of the only Orioles that hit in that series against the Rangers, going 6 of 12 for 1 home run. Adley Rutschman and Gunnar Henderson are going to be the 2 biggest tentpoles of this team. And frankly, you're going to need some big bats if you're going to win this series right out of the gate. I think with the arms that Kansas City is going to put out there, getting to them early, getting the Baltimore crowd really in a frenzy is really the best way to kind of hit early, hit often, and kind of get Kansas City on their heels. Again, they have struggled a lot in this postseason, going into September. They're young. They're not happy to be here type team, but they are definitely going to be a very interesting specimen out there. And I think the Orioles need to realize that this is kind of their time to strike and their time to get into the ALDS. For the Royals, it's going to be the guy who's going to make sure that he gets some first place votes from Aaron Judge when it comes to the AL MVP, and that's Bobby Witt Jr. 332, 32, 109 this season. He hit 489 in the month of August. He was a little hitting in like the 280s, only 263 in his last 30 games, but he led the leading batting average with 332. He hits. He hit 210. And he ranks 3rd in shortstops in StatCats outs above average. He can hit a baseball harder, basically, than almost anybody in the entire league. He is the fastest man in the league based on base path speed. And he became the first shortstop this season with multiple 30-30 seasons. Bobby Witt Jr. is the heart and soul of this team. He got a 7-year contract. Not too many people would have accepted a 7-year contract from a team that's lost 100 games year in and year out. But this was the season they made a 30-win improvement, one of the biggest improvements in baseball history. And it's going to be fun to see the Kansas City Royals and the Baltimore Orioles play. I think these are 2 teams that kind of make up the parity right now with baseball, that you can go from worst to first really at any time. And Bobby Witt Jr. is one of the most exciting players in baseball. We're going to see Shohei Ohtani on the big stage this week for the first time, and we're going to see Bobby Witt Jr. on the big stage this week for the first time. Let's see how it happens, and I'm very excited to see it. Jay, you've ever seen the meme? Martin Scorsese has, it says, absolute cinema. If you have ever seen it, go look at it. It's the other wild card series between the Tigers and the Astros. I love this. The runs both teams are on. Since August 25th, and that's the last time the Tigers were under 500, the Tigers are 20-10. And remember, the last 2 losses were pretty freaking meaningless. Since June 28th, the last time the Astros were under 500, they are 48-32. And oh yeah, there is the fact that the man who led the Astros to their first 3 ALCSs in a row, 2 AL pennants, and 1 World Series is AJ Hinch, and he's going to be in the opposing dugout for these games. And that man could be the one that stops the Astros from going to their 8th consecutive ALCS. Absolute cinema. Jay, give me players on both sides.
I mean, for Houston, it's Jose Altuve, their second baseman and leadoff hitter. I mean, yeah, it's the captain obvious pick, but we all know that Altuve is the engine that drives the Astros bus, especially in the postseason. He's been his best in the middle rounds of the playoffs, the division series, and the league championship series. In 151 plate appearances and 135 at-bats across 32 ALDS games, Altuve has a 274, 351, 556 slash line. It's a 907 OPS with 11 homers, 21 RBI, and 32 runs scored. In 191 plate appearances and 166 at-bats across 42 American League Championship Series games, he has a 295, 382, 560 slash line. It's a 942 OPS, 12 homers, 23 RBI, 38 runs scored. But he hasn't fared as well in the wild card round. Granted, the Astros haven't spent too much time there since they began their run in 2017. He's only played 3 wild card games, and the last time he was in that round was 2020 in Houston's 2-game sweep of the Twins, but he was a non-factor, 0 for 7, 2 walks, a single run batted in. That's a 0.0. That's a 0 flat, 222, 0 flat slash line and a 222 OPS. Very on Altuve October-like. Overall, Altuve had a decent season. 295, 350, 440 slash line, 790 OPS, 127 weighted runs created plus, 20 homers, 65 RBI, 22 steals, 94 runs scored. But it was very much a tale of two halves. He made his 9th All-Star team with a terrific first half, putting up a slash line of 306, 354, 461, OPS of 815, 14 homers, 44 RBI, 15 steals, 56 runs scored, and a weighted run created plus of 134. His second half was just okay. His post-All-Star break slash line, 277, 345, 405, OPS of 750, 6 homers, 21 RBI, 7 steals, 38 runs scored, weighted runs created plus of just 117. He comes into the postseason in the midst of a statistically unacceptable variation. You'd call it a slump. Over his last 10 games, he has a slash line of just 186, 255, 326. That's a 581 OPS. He only has 1 homer, 2 RBI, 1 steal, and only 6 runs scored. Now, he faced the Tigers 5 times this season, and he put up numbers on par with his DS, LCS numbers. 294, 400, 588 slash line. It's a 988 OPS. A homer, 3 RBI, 1 steal, 4 runs scored over 20 plate appearances and 17 at-bats. But in 2 games in Detroit on May 10 and 11, he was just 1 for 8, 1 run scored, 1 walk, 0 extra base hits, 0 RBI. That's a slash line of 125, 222, 125, 347 OPS. Houston split those 2 games, winning the first 5-2, losing the second 8-2, as Altuve was 0 for 4 in the loss after going 1 for 4 with a walk and a run scored in the win. In the 3-game series in Houston, June 14, 15, and 16, Astros took 2 of 3. Altuve, 4 for 9, a pair of doubles, a homer, 3 RBI, a stolen base, and 3 runs scored. 444, 546, 1,000 slash line, 1.54 OPS. The June 14th win was one of the rare times that a lineup made Tigers ace Tarik Skubal look very un-Cy Young-like, which bodes well for Altuve and the Astros in October. Speaking of the Tigers ace, yeah, this is also a Captain Obvious pick. But the likely AL Cy Young, who will join Tiger legends Justin Verlander, Max Scherzer, and Denny McLain. If you don't know who he is, go look up 1968. As winners of the AL's Best Pitcher Award, he'll have to be very Cy Young-like if the Tigers, who are one of the better stories in Major League Baseball this season, are to have a chance against an Astros team that always seems to flip a switch once the calendar flips to October. Skubal will win the pitching triple crown en route to that Cy Young Award as he topped the American League in wins with 18 against just 4 losses, in ERA at 2.39 and strikeouts with 228. But he also leads the American League with an ERA plus of 170, a fielding independent pitching, the Rabbi's favorite stat, of 2.4.
Love it. I always want that every show. Please give me fielding independent.
Hey, I do, because I know how much you enjoy it.
Thank you.
His whip with a whip of 0.922 and a strikeouts per 9 mark of 10.7. He's about to join a very select club whose members are pitchers who have led their league in ERA, strikeouts, but also had a whip under 1 and a strikeout rate higher than 10 per 9. Hat tip to the Athletics' Jason Stark for this list, and it's a hell of a list. Sandy Koufax, 1965. Mike Scott, 1986. Pedro Martinez, 99, 2000, 02. Johan Santana, 04. Garrett Cole, 2019. Now, Cole in 2019 and Martinez in 02 were the only ones who didn't win the Cy Young Award the year they put up those numbers. Both finished second in their league's voting that year. Go figure. And if that's not enough to show you just how dominant Scooball has been this season, wrap your brain around these numbers. Per StatCast, and again, courtesy of Mr. Stark, the Tigers ace has the AL's best rate of pitches in the strike zone by any pitcher, 56.6%, and the second highest swing and miss rate on pitches in the strike zone, a tick under 20%. So he's filling up the strike zone, but only allowing hitters a 2-flat batting average and 0.7 homers per 9. Cleanup hitters have fared even worse against Scooball, slashing just 159, 214, 220 with only 3 extra base hits, an OPS of just 434, an OPS plus of 20. That's 80% worse than the average Major League Baseball hitter. He's faced 196 hitters leading off an inning. He struck out 60 and walked only 6. He's faced 129 hitters with runners in scoring position. He struck out 47 and walked 2. 47 is also the OPS plus of those 129 hitters who faced Scooball with runners in scoring position. Now, he faced the Astros twice this season, going 1-1 against them with a 4.26 ERA. He allowed 6 runs, all earned in 13 hits, including a home run over 12 and 2 innings, 12 and 2/3 inning, walking 3, striking out 9 with a whip of 1.263. Now, on May 11th versus Houston in Detroit, he allowed 2 runs, both earned on 7 hits over 6 1/3, walking 2, striking out 7, en route to his 5th win of the season. On June 14, the game we talked about in the Altuve segment, against Houston, in Houston, he allowed 4 runs, all earned on 6 hits over 6 1/3, walking 1, striking out 2, but allowing a homer, a pair of doubles, and a triple en route to his 2nd loss of the season at the time. That is not a performance Scooball can repeat in October if the Tigers are going to get past the Astros. Now, the Astros have the home field, and since April 27, no AL team has a better record than the Astros, who have more postseason experience than any of the junior circuit's other 5 teams combined, led by Altuve, who will start his 104th career playoff game on Tuesday. The Tigers have Major League Baseball's best record since July 1, led by their pitching staff, who've put up a 2.81 ERA since August 1. Scooball will take the mound for Game 1, and Detroit is 21-10 in his 31 starts. This should be one hell of a series, guys.
By the way, you read that wrong. I read that same stat. I don't think it's the top 5 teams combined, but it's still the most by far of any team.
Okay.
By the way, you didn't mention the fact that he is the first, Scooball is the first pitcher to win the Triple Crown for the AL since 2011. And ironically enough, 2 pitchers did it that year. And Anthony might indirectly mention the other one who did it this year along with Scooball, and that's Chris Sale, by the way, who also won the Triple Crown.
I didn't want to steal anyone else's thunder because I know who the other pitcher was.
Well, he's not good. But hold on. One other thing. Hold on. I need to mention one other thing real quickly that I think is very interesting. Jay mentioned the fact that the hitting is probably going to be under the microscope. Probably by far the biggest weakness of the Houston Astros, considering what the Astros can bring out in this postseason. Realize they have in Brown, they have the third best ERA in baseball since May 5th in them and in Brown, and he's not even going to pitch until Game 3. Ronald Blanco doesn't even get to pitch this entire wild card. It can only really pitch Game 4 because Framber Valdez is going to pitch Game 1. The Astros rotation is really concerning to the rest of the AL because of how deep it is. Anthony, I'll leave you this next series. Let me set that up real quickly. There's only one other NL series that we need to talk about, that the Padres and Braves will battle. Each of these teams actually won 2 of 3 in the 2 series this year on the other's home field. Spoiler, if that happens again, it will be a Braves-Dodgers NLDS matchup. And considering the Dodgers don't want to face an NL West opponent in the NLDS again, I think they would prefer that.
Not with that completed pitch If they
Anthony,
don't.
pick me some players from both sides.
Yeah, I think the last 2 years the Dodgers experience with NL West rivals in the playoffs has not failed well. So
Not great.
so don't be surprised if the low-key Atlanta Braves fans this week. But for the San Diego Padres, Jackson Merrill is going to be the guy I'm paying attention to. Think about this: in high school, he played just 15 games total, and here he is now in his first full season in the big leagues. He plays 156 games, and to his own quote, 162 games is not enough. Congratulations, you're in the playoffs. Now you get to play at least 3 more. But how about this though for a rookie campaign? 292 batting average, a 326 on OBP, 826 on play OPS, 24 home runs, 90 RBIs. Pretty much leading all rookies in slugging percentage, fourth in wins above replacement, and batting and fifth in both fifth in batting average as well. When you think about this, at the start of spring training, he was actually a shortstop who embraced the idea of changing the center field. And it's worked out well for the Padres, especially in the month of August when the Padres really kind of got caught fire and turned the season around. He was one of the catalysts, and it's going to be very interesting. At the late age of 21 years old, he's going to be playing postseason baseball for the first time in his career. And by the way, after 31, the Padres started 31-29, 60 and 37 over the next several months, and a big part of that, success for the Atlanta Braves. And we mentioned Chris Sale. He's the guy I'm paying attention to because it's a question of if he's going to be available in this series at all. I mean, even in a cameo appearance. I mean, we obviously before the start of the second game, he was supposed to pitch that game and was scratched to the back spasms. Now, look at the Atlanta Braves' rotation. They're thin. Schulenbach pitched the first game. Morton pitched over the weekend. They still have Max Fried, but after that, it's kind of a who's who if this series go a full 3 games. Chris Sale, obviously, I think you kind of hinted on it, Jay. He's going to be the runaway NL Cy Young winner without question. Leading ERA leads the majors 2.38, tied with Screwball with wins. 225 strikeouts, ranks second. 3 fewer than the guy you just talked about literally 5 minutes ago. But at the age of 35, he's exceeding expectations. 151 innings combined over the last 3 seasons. But he's been healthy for the most part. And unfortunately, like the back spasms, the backmen haven't had a problem. Think about September 19th, he complained about back discomfort in the start against Cincinnati. The Braves hoping a little rest would go a long way. He was actually scheduled to start one of the rainout games too for them against the Mets. So a lot has happened with this Braves rotation in the last week. Even though they got in winning game 162 against the Mets, it has left them just as depleted in their starting rotation as the Mets is to some extent as far as the back end of the bullpen. And that's the drawback of not taking care of your business when you have the opportunity to do so. In all 3 cases, the Mets failed to do that over the weekend. The Diamondbacks, you think about it, I think one of the games that blew an 8-0 lead that's coming back to hunt them dearly tonight. Otherwise, they'd be a playoff team and not the Atlanta Braves. And the Atlanta Braves could have clinched Sunday afternoon if they hadn't gave the Kansas City Warriors jump on top of them early on. It was not able to come back as they were on Saturday. But Chris Sale is a big question mark. There's a huge loss if he's not available in the wild card. And if they even get past the Padres and get to the Dodgers, if he's available in the division series as well.
I think Anthony is absolutely right. Jackson is going to make a huge part of his team in this wild card series. Oh, I'm sorry. There are 3 Jacksons who are rookies right now playing in the wild card series this week. Jackson Merrill for the Padres, Jackson Churio for the Brewers, and Jackson Holiday for the Orioles. All 20 to 21 years old, all making their postseason debuts, all named Jackson.
You know
Jackson
what?
is the range of names of the day.
You know what? You know what this? You know what? To kind of cap off the name Jackson, this whole postseason is to be sponsored by Jackson Hewitt.
Yep, where you can get your tax returns going and
Touche. Well played. Well
get
played.
your tax returns down. But all of those Jacksons could also be eliminated by the time we get to the DS too. It's kind of insane. All right, guys, we have to move on to the gridiron. After the Giants on defense in week 2 gave up only field goals, and in week 3 gave up 15 points, the offense did both of those things in week number 4, only scoring 15 points on field goals against the Dallas Cowboys. Full circle. Unfortunately, the Cowboys scored 20, and Dak Prescott won his 1,209th consecutive game. I'm sorry, it's just 13 consecutive games against the Giants, although it feels like it's 1,209. First, next up for the Giants is the Seattle Seahawks, which has been a house of horrors over the years. The Giants, with a crowded attendance, have not won in Seattle since 2010. They won in 2020, but again, that's why I referenced crowded attendance. You know the deal. We've done this before, Jay. I need a positive from this past game to move forward on to week number 5.
Yeah, just to be clear, that full circle you were talking about is Dante's ninth circle of hell. This was a tough loss for
There could be worse games. We have the Jets still left. There could be worse. We still have the Jets to go.
That may be true, but you know there are circles lower than 9. In this instance, it's for the Giants. It's 9. The Jets, we're getting into like double figures. This was a tough loss for the Giants, to say the least. If they were able to generate any kind of a run game against a Dallas run defense that heretofore had just been gashed in their previous losses, allowing 190 to New Orleans and 274 to Baltimore, New York could have snapped Brian Daboll's personal 5-game losing streak to the Cowboys and their own stretch of 14 losses in their last 15 games against Dallas. But only managing 26 yards rushing on 24 carries, that's 1.1 yards per carry, guys. Anthony, even as retired from football as he is, could probably do better than that against the Dallas run D.
Maybe so.
Giants a one-dimensional offense, and that was a huge reason they fell just 5 points short. It also didn't help that the Giants were conservative with the passing game, but being behind the sticks more often than they'd like, and having such an anemic showing running the ball was part of the reason why. Overall, quarterback Daniel Jones, 29 of 40, 281 yards, 0 TDs, 1 pick, but that was a heave at the end of the game in a last-ditch attempt to win the game. It's his only blemish. He only had 1 sack. He averaged 7 yards per attempt, completed 72.5% of his passes, had an 81.4 passer rating. That would have been over 90 if not for the pick. However, the game plan seemed to focus on the underneath routes. Only 7 of Jones's 29 completions went for 10-plus yards, 10-plus air yards, and only 3 of those went for more than 15 yards through the air. 6 were either at or behind the line of scrimmage, and 8 were within 5 yards of it. I'm getting to the positive, trust me. As usual, Malik Neighbors led the Giants with 15 targets from Jones, resulting in 12 catches for 112 yards. Again, only 9.6 yards per catch due to the underneath stuff, though he did have 3 plays that went for more than 15 yards. All that being said, the silver lining in the cloud may be the discovery of their wide receiver 2, the Robin to Neighbors Batman, in the person of third-year wideout Wan'Dale Robinson, who was targeted 14 times by Jones. They connected on 11 of them for 71 yards, 6.5 yards per pass. Brian, throw the ball down the field, dude. And was indicative of the focus on that underneath game. Robinson is making a name for himself as a chain mover, and last week was just another example of it. 8 of his 11 catches were on third down and went for 50 yards, including a key catch on a 3rd and 11 in the fourth quarter, where he made the first defender miss, allowing him to pick up 8 on the play, creating a more manageable 4th and 3 that Neighbors then converted. Robinson is very adept at making the first defender miss after the catch, so he's consistently picking up yards after catch. 37 of his 71 against Dallas came after the catch, which is a valuable skill for a chain mover, especially when the plan for the passing game is focused on underneath routes. His 10 catches for first downs this season is second to Neighbors' 19. His 110 yards after the catch is third behind Neighbors' 156 and Go figure. Running back Devin Singletary is 117. Obviously, if the Giants are going to have a legitimate NFL level passing attack, they need to be able to hit on some deep shots. Underthrowing receivers on those routes is something that Jones has struggled with going all the way back to camp, though he did hit on a 28-yarder to Darius Slayton and a 39-yarder to Neighbors. But if Wan'Dale Robinson has legitimately locked down that wide receiver 2 spot and can be that chain-moving safety valve that Jones can count on when Neighbors is blanketed, then the Giants will have added to that offensive identity they seem to have found the week before. That is a positive you can take away from an otherwise crushing loss to the hated Cowboys.
One thing I do realize is I see a lot of Sterling Shepard like play in Wan'Dale Robinson in terms,
that's a good comp.
In terms of him like moving the chains and keeping it up. However, if he ends up being that number 1 wide receiver, if Malik Neighbors hasn't gone back from this concussion, don't like their chances. In fact, I don't like their chances in any way, shape, or form, because without Neighbors, that offense is even more bland than it was in week number 4 and week number 3.
What's the offense they had last year?
It's not even that, honestly. I think it might be even worse, but we'll see how that goes on. Hopefully,
based on the wide receiver room, it would be last year's wide receiver room pretty much. If Neighbors,
it's still even worse though, just because of the fact that it's just not a confident bunch whatsoever, and I feel like the play calling has kind of gone backwards.
Yeah, I agree.
That's just my opinion. Anthony, defense actually had a decent game outside of a lot of penalties and a lot of just letting CD Lamb go by the wayside a lot. But that happened. So there are a lot of negatives, by the way, from this game that needs to be taken into account. Which one are you looking at?
Well, there's a number of things. Number one, the offensive play calling has been pretty much vanilla. I don't know to remember these Giant days. I thought Ray Haley was coaching this team all over again with the incredibly bland offensive play calling. It's like, good grief.
I disagree with that one, shockingly, and I've been hanging the all season with that, but whatever.
like, good grief, Brian Daboll, take some shots downfield for Pete's sake. Look, I get it. When the Cowboys are playing kind of in a cover 2 and taking away the deep passes because of Neighbors' ability to be a playmaker, you kind of have to take those underneath passes by necessity. But the thing is, you got to take shots downfield at least to keep the defense honest. And until Daniel Jones do that with any kind of consistency, teams are just gonna stay in a cover 2 shell and just gonna, hey, look, we'll give you the dink and dunk and we'll just make the tackle, and we know you're not going to do a whole lot after that. It gives me Chicago Bears 2001 offense when the defense pretty much took them to a playoff spot, but the offense can't do anything about it. It was just a lot of dinking and dunking. I have so many bad memories of these kind of offenses. It made me. It was a reason why I invested so much money in NFL Sunday Ticket back in the day, so I could watch someone else other than the team that I was investing in. But also another thing is it was missed opportunities. So when you kick, you realize the Giants have not scored an offensive touchdown at home this season in 2 games. They literally have kicked 5 field goals against Dallas and 3 against Minnesota. So basically 8 field goals and 0 touchdowns in 2 home games, 8 full quarters of football inside MetLife Stadium. That's pathetic. That's pretty much what it is. Daboll, he went for the number. He actually went for it a couple of times, 3 for 4 on 4th down. And you wonder why didn't you go for it inside the red zone when you have 4th and goal or 3, and the Giants desperately needing anything to try to turn this offense around. What else? And the Giants, they outgained the Cowboys 303 to 293. Had 2 more first downs. Actually had more passing yards, and the defense did a great job in the second half, limiting the Cowboys to 2 field goals, and actually being able to get pressure on Dak Prescott, and even getting a couple of sacks. But they didn't force any turnovers. They had fewer, and the Giants actually had fewer penalties, even though there was one that took away a big first down on the opening drive that led to 1 of the 5 field goals. You just can't shoot yourself in the foot. And against a Cowboy team that was vulnerable, that had clearly not played their best football outside of week 1, you have got to take advantage of these opportunities. Hey, look, the good news is it wasn't 40 to nothing, or 49-17, as we saw last season, the Giants were actually competitive in this game. But until they figure out a way to get out of if they figure out a way to get out of their own way, we're gonna have more frustrating weeks like this. And by the way, it doesn't get any easier with going to Seattle and dealing with the 12th man in that crowd. And every time I think of Seattle and the 12th man, I think of remember the false start game in 2005 when it was like with 10 false start penalties that the Giants racked up in that game. Yeah, the Giants are not exactly a disciplined team in their own right. They're gonna have to figure out a way to get the running game going. They didn't do anything. And you're right, Jay. Maybe in my heyday, I could probably get to 30, 40 yards. But other than
you can't get to 30, 40 yards even on this defense. I think I don't think you want to see Micah Parsons covering you in that. Maybe Dallas, but
Seattle, no way. Well, I mean, Detroit's making it a little easy tonight, but that's the Lions. But that's still on there. Yeah, the Giants have a lot of work to do. They get a mini bye to work on a lot of things. They better hope Neighbors is actually healthy enough to play. Otherwise, it is going to be one ugly sunny afternoon in the Pacific Northwest.
Yeah, and one thing I have to mention is the fact that you mentioned how they got a penalty on the first drive that stopped them from getting a field goal. It was actually literally an incorrectly called penalty. That was a face mask that should have been against the Cowboys. That was actually incorrectly put on there. But otherwise, the Giants are just kind of struggling through this season, and they really just need to get have just like a good confidence from Brian Daboll to Daniel Jones that he can throw the ball down the field and he trusts him to make plays without his receivers dropping the ball every now and then. They had a bunch of drops last week, more than you've seen pretty much this whole entire season. Okay, so the common theme with these two players of the Jets and Giants opponents that are going to watch is, they both work here in New York. And in the case of Geno Smith, he was in both spots in New York. In fact, he's the one that broke Eli Manning's consecutive game started streak. But in 2024, for the now to be 3-1 Seattle Seahawks in just a moment, Geno has had his best year. His first two games, very efficient, almost 75% passing in the first game, going 18-25 for 171. But then he was very good, even though he had some high volume. In the overtime game against New England, which they won 23-20, 33 of 44 for 327, 26 of 34 against Miami for 289. Tonight, he threw for almost 400 yards. He threw for 395 in what will be a loss to Detroit. He has been a little careless with the ball, had 2 interceptions against Miami. I believe he had an interception just now against Detroit as well. So he does have a 4 touchdown to 4 interception. But every single year we count Geno Smith out, we're like, okay, this year he's done, this year he's done. But he's just proven in really a new offense for him, an offensive coordinator, Ryan Grubb, as Mike McDonald, not Mike McDaniel, don't get those names confused, Mike McDonald, formerly of the Ravens, takes over this team. Geno Smith has been very, very, very solid and has been really a top 10 quarterback. And by the way, I mentioned the fact that in those first 3 games, he did have 3 turnovers. Only one of those passes, according to Pro Football Focus, was turnover worthy. So you have a lot of offensive weapons in that backfield. You have Zach Charbonnet, you have Kenneth Walker III, who came back tonight from injury. You have the Tyler Lockett, DK Metcalf, who is still built like a wide receiver should be, and is somebody who is a matchup nightmare no matter who you put on him at any time. There's not too many quarterbacks that can cover DK Metcalf one-on-one. But Geno Smith has been the straw that stirs the drink for a Seattle team that is going to compete for the NFC West this entire year. And why not now? San Francisco has been banged up the whole entire year. Who knows if Christian McCaffrey will even play a game? And this is really the time to strike if you're Seattle. And I think they have all the weapons to do that. And right now they have the help, and they have one of the better quarterbacks in the National Football League. All right, let's move on to gangrene. Oh, boy. In a game that had a grand total of 432 yards from both teams, in a game where the opposing quarterback ended up throwing for 60 yards, which, by the way, is the least amount of yards for a starting quarterback in a game that they won since Eli Manning did it in 2007, in a game where Bo Nix's yards in the first half were a master score like -7. Yep, the Jets still lost to the Broncos in a cold, damp MetLife Stadium that unfortunately Anthony and family had to attend 10-9. Yep, 2 hours of game time this past week in the MetLife Stadium, 8 field goals from both teams. Not what you want. And now the Jets have to go to London as the greatest Jet of the past 10 years, Sam Darnold, awaits for the 4-0. Yes, I said 4-0. Minnesota Vikings, whose start has included 3 Ws against 3 playoff teams who made the divisional round in 2023. Oh, and they also beat that other team from New York in week 1. Jay, what positive do the Jets need to take across the Atlantic Ocean?
You know, the number of times you said in a game had me thinking about that legendary voice the voiceover during movie trailers. In a world, in this case, in a world where the Jets on a rainy, fugly Sunday
are the Jets.
Yes, exactly. It was a rainy, fugly Sunday in East Rutherford. Anthony, I think you're still drying off from it, right?
Yeah, my clothes I think is finally dried off. It took about 24 hours, but yeah, next time I bring my rain boots.
There you go. It made for a slog of a game, which places a premium on defense and ball security, and usually comes down to a field goal made or missed. For the Jets, it was a missed 50-yard field goal late in the fourth quarter that cost them the game. But their defense kept them in this game for most of the full 60 minutes, and definitely all of the first 30 minutes was one of the most dominant performances by a Jets defense in recent memory, and that's the positive takeaway I have. They held Denver to 0 points and just 3 first downs, none through the air. They had 4 tackles for loss, forced a turnover, a fumble. The Broncos were over 7 on third down conversions and 0 pass plays of positive yardage. The Jets held Bo Nix, Denver's rookie quarterback, to 7 of 15 passing for -7 yards passing. That's a yards per attempt of -0.5. All 7 of his completions came on throws behind the line of scrimmage, and the -7 yards was the fewest passing yards in a half by a Broncos quarterback since the year 2000. The Jets allowed Denver 46 yards of total offense, 1.8 yards per play. That number is a little deceiving, as Denver did average 5.3 yards per carry on the ground, 53 yards on 10 carries. Overall, it was a defensive performance reminiscent of the Zach Wilson, Adam Gase era Jets, where Sauce Gardner, the Williams brothers and company had to bring their A++ game every week to even give Gangrene a chance. Overall, they allowed just 10 points, but you figure that even in a bad weather game, an offense led by Aaron Rodgers should be able to put up more than 10 points, right? And before Sunday, Rodgers had only lost once when his defense had held the opponent to 10 points or less. Packers lost 7-3 to the Lions all the way back in 2010. The defense held Knicks to just those 60 yards passing on 12 of 25. It's 48% completion percentage. But he did manage to connect with wide receiver Courtland Sutton for the first touchdown pass of his career and the only touchdown either team scored. Those 60 yards, as Rabbi noted, are the fewest total passing yards for a winning quarterback who had at least 20 attempts since 2007 per ESPN Stats and Info. I did not realize it was Eli. The Jets held Denver to 186 yards and 12 first downs total, 133 yards and 9 first downs in the second half, which, along with allowing just those 10 points, should have been enough to get the W. It didn't happen this time, but I have to believe that if all they can replicate is their second half performance more often than not this season, they'll win more than they'll lose. I don't expect the first half to get replicated. That was ridiculous. Not sure they can pull that off against their old pal Sam Darnold and the Vikings, but it's something positive to take away from this tough, fugly loss.
Although you'll have to say you can't have any worse weather when you're in London, apparently, right? Right?
Really? That's considered a pleasant fall afternoon in London. Come on.
We'll see. This is going to be a very interesting weather scenario, and maybe Aaron Rodgers will blame the weather again. He could get points during yesterday's game. Anthony, negative, and you don't have to go far because it's exactly the same negative as they had last week.
They're littered all over the floor, just like your wet clothes, Anthony.
Yeah, it's a lot of laundry, that's for sure. 15 penalties.
My
15.
God. 13 accepted, by the way.
13 accepted penalties. 10 of them on offense. 8 accepted. It seemed like every time the Jets offense tried to get anything going, a false start was almost inevitable on this offensive line. And an offensive line that gave up 5 sacks, by the way. And allowed Aaron Rodgers to get hit a couple more times on an afternoon. Well, we get it. Aaron Rodgers is not a fan of science. He's probably cursing out Mother Nature right now, especially after the fact that the race stopped when the game was over.
And cursed out Robert Saleh immediately after that, by the way, after he cursed out Mother Nature.
And apparently he cursed out the media who kind of got on his case, saying that maybe his cadence, which he's one of the best at in the NFL.
No, it was at Saleh. That was literally at Saleh because Saleh made the comment literally minutes before, and the media got it back to him. So it was more of a shot at Saleh for saying something that you knew Aaron was going to respond to.
Yeah, but it speaks to the undisciplined nature of the young guys on this team.
Yeah, there was a number of times too, especially in the second half, where Aaron Rodgers clearly was looking for one route, and the receivers just not on the same page. There was a couple of a back shoulder throw attempts where the receivers clearly were not expecting it. There was one pass where on instant replay, you literally saw the ball squirt out of the hands of Aaron Rodgers as he's trying to throw it, which he had a wide open receiver on the play that came out kind of funny, like a knuckler. And again, I mean, you think about this, when you hold a quarterback for -7 yards and you have first and goal inside the 5 and you don't score, you don't get in the end zone. I mean, it just set things up for a number of things that could go wrong. I mean, Breece Hall, this is your home run guy, and he had 10 carries for 4 yards, 1 drop, and was called for 2 penalties. And by the way, I'm surprised you ain't run Brilliant Allen at the goal line under any of those circumstances inside when you have first and goal. So and some of this had to go on there and hack it too. Some of the play calling was just really mind-numbing. I mean, what's the funny part is I'm sitting with my nephew. It's 4th down. I literally calling out the Broncos defensive play before they line up. I'm literally saying they're going to blitz backside because they have not been able to pick that out. The corner's coming. And sure enough, nobody in the Jets seemed to figure out that there was a corner blitz coming on Aaron Rodgers' backside and led to a sack. And even when they got the ball back, their play calling again was just as bad. Under those conditions, do you really want Greg Zuerlein trying to attempt a field goal over 40 yards and that downpour? No, it was. Or they got a first down. On second down, I saw 3 incredibly bad. I'm thinking to myself, you know what? If the Broncos are going to blitz, why not call a screen with Breece Hall? He's your home run guy and try to get some more yards and try to make it a more manageable field goal. That didn't happen. I'll tell you what. When you are an 8-point favorite against a team, and for what it's worth, the Broncos' defense is really solid. That's a really good young secondary that the Jets is going up against. But when you're an 8-point favorite, the quarterback is pretty much on par to win the Masters in the first half. Mm-hmm. And you can't get a single touchdown. I don't know what it is I don't know what's in the water in the East Rutherford, but besides the swamp water. But other than the fact that neither home team was able to find the end zone despite multiple opportunities, says a lot about both football teams in New York right now. And for the Giants, it's just this awful play calling for the Jets. It's a number of things. This is a very undisciplined football team. We were thinking about the penalty issues they had in the first 3 games. Date back to the opener against San Francisco. And now you have the lack of a running game that's a factor. And clearly, Aaron Rodgers and Robert Saleh is not on the same page. It's starting to come out more and more each week. Even a win. Remember the hug that Saleh was trying to give Aaron Rodgers, kind of brushed him off a little bit. There's definitely a disconnect going on in this locker room, and the Jets are going to have to figure it out because that's going to be easy the next couple of weeks. After they come back from London, they got to play the Buffalo Bills Sunday night back home. So
Monday night back home.
Monday night. And they got a very short time to figure it out. And Minnesota's defense is not going to make it any easier on them either.
So let's talk about the Minnesota Vikings, who I will never pick against the Giants in any way, shape, or form after week 1. I thought that would have been the easiest game of their schedule. So
not so much.
Tell me this. If you were to pick a team in the NFC Norris division this year that was going to make a run to be the NFL's best team, not just the NFC's best team, would it be the team with the greatest show on turf who has many offensive weapons, whose quarterback just got signed to a big contract? Would it be the quarterback who is one of the youngest players in the league, who also got signed to a big contract and made a really big run last year in the playoffs? Or would it be the team that had the number 1 quarterback and generational talent like Caleb Williams? The answer is none of the above. It's the team that picked up Sam Darnold in the offseason as a literal bridge to what was supposed to be J.J. McCarthy until he got injured during training camp. Why are the Vikings 4-0 after 4 weeks of the NFL season? One of the main reasons is the former number 3 pick of the 2018 draft, Sam Darnold. He leads the NFL in touchdown passes. He threw 3 yesterday against the Packers. He has 11 so far. He has 932 yards passing on a 68.9% completion percentage. That's, by the way, 8.8 yards attempt, and has a stellar passer rating of almost 119. He's working with, ironically enough, the true bridge of bridge quarterbacks, Josh McCown, as his quarterback coach, and one of the reasons why he went to Minnesota. And he's had the best season of his career so far. He has exceeded all expectations in this role. And from what it seems like, he's just more comfortable. The weapons are obviously amazing. Jordan Addison, who was the first-round pick 2 years ago, who seems like he could be a number 1 wide receiver on a lot of other teams. They picked up Jalen Nader late in the preseason, and now he is filled in very nice as a number 3 wide receiver. And, of course, when you have Justin Jefferson on your team, you're going to have a good chance to win a lot, no matter who's throwing the quarterback. Jay, that could include you, by the way, because of just how good the weapons are. Not to mention the fact that Aaron Jones has been on a mission this year in the backfield, coming back from Green Bay, just because of the fact that he can also catch the ball, too, even though he's in that exclusive almost at the 30-year-old club, which is almost like a bad number for running backs. By the way, salute. This is the year of the running back returning, if you've seen Derek Henry or Saquon Barkley out there. It's amazing Aaron Darnold has really just resurrected his career. It may lead to more questions in Minnesota as we get closer and closer to the end of the year, but it shows how Kevin O'Connell has been basically able to make chicken salad out of a decent raw chicken who had all of the ingredients, who's never really had a starting job as his own, except for the few weeks that he was the starting quarterback of the Carolina Panthers, where he did have a good start. Then he faded. But he really hasn't been able to start a real full season or really have the confidence of a team since his time with the Jets. Ironically enough, when they go over to London this week to play, Darnold will be on a mission, it seems like. He is ready to take over and really just take over the NFL. What is hilarious about the whole situation is if you look at the 2018 draft, Baker Mayfield was the number 1 pick, and he's having a very good season in Tampa Bay so far and really had a career renaissance. The number 2 pick was Saquon Barkley, who has probably been the offensive player of the year through the first few weeks of the season. The number 7 pick was Josh Allen, who has probably played his way also into MVP range. Just all of these players having a nice little renaissance, but Sam Darnold is the most shocking of them all. And I mentioned before, Sam Darnold, Geno Smith, didn't they play some time in MetLife Stadium when no one thought they would ever be a competent quarterback?
Yep.
Yeah, those days have changed.
The interesting thing, Rabbi, is that Allen is the only member of those, only one of those draft picks that you mentioned who is still on his original team. And you talk about it in terms of the quarterbacks, and I said this to you when we were, talking earlier offline earlier this week or at the end of last week and over the weekend when I said there's a reason I harp on a quarterbacks coming out of college, landing in the right system with the right coordinator coming out of college. Darnold was not in a good situation in New York. Carolina was a disaster, obviously still is. I think I'm probably less surprised by what I'm seeing from him this year than a lot of other people are, because I saw what he could do when
For sure.
I saw what because when it went in college at USC, he had an offensive line giving him a clean pocket. He had a running game. He didn't have as ridiculous a defense as the unit that Brian Flores has terrorizing the NFL, but he also had weapons on the perimeter. Sam Darnold in that situation, hell, any competent quarterback in that situation can do what you're seeing him do now. Kevin O'Connell's scheme is similar to the scheme he ran in San Francisco with Shanahan. And in the times in which he had to play in San Francisco, he played well. Sam Darnold, despite everything he's been through, has never lost confidence in his ability to actually play quarterback in the NFL. Neither is Geno Smith, for that matter. Something we cannot ascribe to Zach Wilson, shall we say. So I'm not surprised, because I always felt that in the right system with the right coach and the right team around him, Sam Darnold could do this.
Yes, he's really flourished. But go ahead.
Yeah, well, I was speaking of right situation. You brought up Brian Flores. That defense, good grief. I mean, they have been terrorized in the first 4 games. I mean, it was good.
Drawing comparison to the purple people eaters of the 70s, man.
Yeah, I actually watched Teddy Bruschi, ESPN break this down. The look that quarterbacks are seeing before the snap is literally not the look they're getting when the ball is snapped. I mean, this defense has been it's just been unbelievable. They literally made Jordan Love Sunday miserable. Even as Jordan Love was trying to mount a comeback. I mean, it did not look good for the 3 quarters of that game. But you think about this, and by the way, shout out to Brian Flores, Brownsville native, of course. But when you look at it like this, and everything that took place in Miami and how that situation will kind of play out. In 38 games, Brian Flores is 22-16 in Miami. Mike McDaniels, with tonight's loss, is now 21-17 through 38 games. So you think of it like this, like what could have been? Mike McDaniels, great as a good head coach, without question.
No, that's not fair.
It's not. I would say it's not a fair thing, but then you think about what led to Brian Flores firing in Miami, and it really wasn't anything on the field.
No, it wasn't X's and O's.
It wasn't X's and O's, but it was also developing of a quarterback. That was really it seemed.
Look, the number of times, guys, we've talked about on this show how certain guys who just, for whatever reason, they're just not built to be head coaches, but they will be Hall of Famers as a coordinator in their specific discipline. I hope Brian Flores gets a chance to prove me wrong in that regard. But if he becomes this generation's Vic Fangio, if you will, that's a hell of a or Wade Phillips. That's not a bad career. Way to spend your career in the NFL as a coach.
Steve Spagnuolo, by the way, on line 1.
Spags is a contemporary. I'm talking about guys, who have already,
Vic Fangio is still in the NFL. What do you
Rabbi,
mean?
Spags is a contemporary. Guys like Wade Phillips, guys like Fangio, these guys are retired or closer to retirement and have put 40 years in. That's what I'm talking about. If that's Flores' future, that's not a bad future to look forward to, is all I'm saying. Same with
Understood.
Spags.
Yeah, yeah, I would like to see Flores get another head coach opportunity, but I think it's got to be the right situation. A front office that he could be on the same page, and also allowing him to get the guys he wants. Because in Miami, the fallout was over drafting Tua. I mean, the front office wanted him, Flores did not, and you obviously saw the disconnect there that led to that marriage going south.
Yeah, his
So
head coaching
yeah,
job, he's probably better served coming into a situation with an established quarterback one.
Well, by the way, funny thing is to finish up this story since we got on the Brian Flores tangent. That same draft, by the way, the number 32 quarterback picked, Lamar Jackson. The number 10 quarterback pick, Hall of Famer Josh Rosen. I'm just saying.
As I heard,
oh,
going to Wharton School of Business. So we all knew that Josh Rosen was a little different, but there was never any doubt the guy was smart as hell.
Yeah, he's tremendously smart as hell, just not an NFL quarterback in any way, shape, or form. Before we go, I want to mention the loss of two iconic figures in each of their sports for different reasons. Dikembe Mutombo is a player who died unfortunately at just the age of 58 from brain cancer. One of the best defensive players ever in basketball history, and one of the most charismatic players ever in basketball history. Just watching, he was inducted into the Hall of Fame in 2015. 18-year playing career. One of the first real African prospects came from the Democratic Republic of Congo to come into the NBA and really just show all of his swagger and really just show that he was a championship building piece to a lot of different teams. And I will always remember him just from the finger wag. And the fact that it made it all the way onto a Geico commercial, for God's sakes, basically saying, no, not today. I actually watched that this morning just to kind of make me feel a little bit better. But having a guy with the warmth and energy of Dikembe Mutombo and a guy who made so many other Hall of Famers and contemporary basketball players of today, like Joel Embiid, talking about him today, just makes me feel kind of sad. We lost a very great person in Dikembe Mutombo who did more just on court and off of the court, was one of the nicest people you can imagine in the NBA, and he will be missed, unfortunately, passing away age 58. And now also we got the news that maybe like 3 or 4 hours ago that Pete Rose passed away. No matter what you think of Pete Rose, he will always be known as Charlie Hustle for a reason. His 4,256 hits from the Cincinnati Reds and Philadelphia Phillies. He will be an icon in both of those towns, regardless of anything that he's done in the rest of his career. He is one of possibly baseball's most polarizing figure, modern era. And just seeing what he did on the baseball field. I've never again seen him ever play, but considering all of the attributes he had to really back then are attributes that you possibly see out of a lot of players today in terms of some of the hardest working players, some of the players that will always go an extra base when you didn't necessarily need to go an extra base. And yes, I will say again, he is polarizing for many different ways. For the gambling ban that ended up ruining any possibility of him making the Hall of Fame, at least while alive. And to really just the way he is just very vocal and very, very rash about everything. He is, and again, this is not a compliment or an insult. He is a larger than life character out there. And so even if you like him or hate him, you're going to you're going to notice and miss his presence out there. Sad day for both as the passings of both Pete Rose and Dikembe Mutombo. Anybody want to comment before we go?
And go ahead.
Yeah, I would say I'll start with Dikembe Mutombo. He came from that, that long line of Georgetown centers, following behind Patrick Ewing and Alonzo Mourning, one of the greatest one of the greatest centers of all time, solely one of the greatest defensive players of all time. And if you wanted to take an image from Dikembe Mutombo's basketball career, 1994 Game 5 and upsetting the heavily favored Seattle Supersonics, and the shot of Mutombo falling down, embracing the basketball, as the Nuggets became the first 8 seed to advance to the second round by knocking off a number 1. But Mutombo's career attributes on the court was only exceeded by the individual he was off the court, and the ambassador he was for the NBA, and going back to his home country, and just between building hospitals and schools and just all kinds of philanthropy, and just one of the one of the all-time good guys without question. 58 is a life cut well too short and ending too soon. Because Dikembe offers so much of himself. His son today posted a really nice tribute, and one of his former teammates from the Atlanta Hawks, Steve Smith, also posted something on Instagram. But he's definitely will be missed. Pete Rose, I said for a long time that it's impossible to talk about the game of baseball without the hit king being involved. And I feel like for the Baseball Hall of Fame, when you think about guys like Barry Bonds and Mark McGwire and Roger Clemens and Pete Rose, I always felt like to tell the story of baseball in its entirety, that they need to be included, but their stories of what their transgressions, for better or for worse, had to be included in that. Baseball is a story. It's a novel that just keeps adding chapter after chapter. And finally this year, the Negro League records was included as well, and that's something that I thought was a big step forward. But it's an unfortunate thing, and I felt like maybe years sooner Pete Rose maybe came clean. He spent decades denying any wrongdoing until he did finally confess, but it felt like it was too little, too late when he did. I remember he was doing the pre-show for Fox during the playoff series. It was him. It was
Not too long ago either, by the way.
Yeah, it was Frank Thomas to Keith Hernandez, and there was a segment when they were just going over the science of hitting. You think about being a fly on a wall and listening to these guys talk about hitting, and Pete Rose is in that room, and you watch that first game in a doubleheader, and just watching the Braves and Mets basically play like two desperate teams trying to get into the postseason. That was a game that I think Charlie Hustle would have loved without question, because there was because there were two teams that literally left it all on the field. Polarizing. You mentioned the WWE Hall of Fame as well, and one of his biggest post baseball careers rivalries with Kane of all people. But
As the San Diego Chicken.
And but larger than life character, polarizing. His impact is definitely going to be felt for a long time, but also his presence is going to be missed for quite a while, a very long time, because of what he brought to the game of baseball. Say what you will about the gambling allegations, of course, as a manager, but as a player, it was hard to deny his career accomplishments without question. I mean, and also him knocking over a back catcher in the All-Star game. He played every game like it was his last, and he earned that nickname Charlie Hudson for a reason.
Yeah, you did and Rabo, you too. You both did a really good job of summing up both of these guys. So, I'll keep this brief since in Rose's case, I don't want to speak too ill of the recently departed. And in Mutombo's case, I'll have more to say in our sign off. What's interesting to me is the contrast between these two athletes who, during their playing days, were multiple time All-Stars and were among the best ever with their particular skill in their particular sport. For Rose, it was swatting a baseball, something he did safely 4,256 times. And for Mutombo, it was swatting a basketball, something he did emphatically 3,289 times. And each collected plenty of individual hardware as a testament to that skill. But once the sport stopped being their primary career, they went in completely different directions in life. To borrow from Star Wars, Rose's path took him to the dark side, never once accepting responsibility for the wrongdoing that got him banned for baseball or looking to reform. Mutombo's took him to the light side, where he used his name, his platform, and his own money to make people's lives better on two continents, especially in his native country, the Democratic Republic of the Congo. I think you can guess who I'll miss more.
Okay. For that, think we're going to end this show. For Jay Kaplan and Anthony Strait, my cohorts, I'm Stephen Rabinowitz, and I have never accepted money from Turkish Airlines. But if you want to call me, I'm right here.
You're saying that qualifies you to be mayor of New York?
I can always use a free flight over to Istanbul if you need to.
Hey, Brooklyn's the Istanbul of America, right?
Brooklyn is definitely not the Istanbul of America, Mayor Adams. It is not. It is very good. I've seen that already. Socials, youtube.com/onthesportslines for all of our stuff on demand, facebook.com/onthesportslines as well in many different ways. And Jay,
our Twitter handle is ONTH Sportslines, where you'll find a link to each new show like tonight's, along with tidbits and nuggets from the world of sports that we think are worth your time to check out. This week, there's a link to a story by The Athletic's Hunter Patterson on the passing of NBA Hall of Famer Dikembe Mutombo, a four-time Defensive Player of the Year award winner who was one of the best shot blockers on the court. Those 3,289 blocks are second all time, and a global humanitarian off of it who advocated for people in underserved communities, ensuring they had access to education, economic opportunities, and health services, especially in Africa, after becoming the NBA's first global ambassador in 2009. He was instrumental in the creation of NBA Africa, aiding in the development of the Basketball Africa League. The piece is a testimony to a man who was a giant both on and off the court, and whose impact on the world will still be felt even though he's gone.
All right, with all of that, we will see you next time on the Sports Lines. Enjoy your October baseball. And if you want, make sure you can also apply for a rat czar position, which might be open up in the near future.
To all of those who are members of the tribes. Good night, everybody.